Epiphany Plus. Why do I call it Epiphany Plus? Because Epiphany is a Sunday, right? Well, Epiphany is a day, January 6th, which is 12 days after Christmas. And it used to be that we only sang Christmas carols between Christmas and January 6th. That was the 12 days of Christmas, you know, where that song comes from. And we used to have partridges and pear trees, apparently. Um, but Epiphany also is a Sunday. So whatever Sunday is closest to January 6th is Epiphany Sunday. And then we have baptism of the Lord in the Sunday after that. And then there are the ambiguous ordinary time Sundays. Then there's Lent. And it's so the Epiphany Plus season, as I call it, is usually the Sunday of Epiphany. Although I will tell you that this year I am ending the Advent Christmas series with a service on Epiphany Sunday because that's what Adam Tice does in his devotional book. So it's a longer thing than usual. And as always, you can either do it or not do it. It won't feel like it hasn't ended if you don't do that last one. But I'm going to go ahead and do that since I'm inspired by his book and we're using that book, Carols for the Coming Christ. So Easter is a movable feast, as you know. And so the number of Sundays that you are designing for in this Epiphany Plus window is going to change from year to year. So we'll get to that in a moment, how many we have in 2027. Epiphany, this human yearning that I talk about, we start with what is our human yearning that's being addressed by the scriptures and the theology of a particular season. And so for me, Epiphany, I mean, it's when you think about the word Epiphany, it's like an aha, right? And that's not the origin of that season, liturgical season word, but we can use it that way. So that yearning for elimination, for knowing, for discovery, for relationship. Oftentimes the scriptures in this time period um, in the Revised Common Lectionary are focused on people discovering who Jesus is. He's not your average run-of-the-mill son of a carpenter. He's not even your average run-of-the-mill rabbi or teacher. He's something else, something more, something special. Ooh, that could be a good Epiphany series, something more. Ooh, okay. Anyway, so see, this is the way brainstorming works, right? You dig into the human aspect, the theological aspect, the scriptural aspect, the story, narrative story, and things pop out like epiphanies. I know. R. Okay, groan. Go ahead, y'all, groan. All right, so where is illumination, relationship, and risk needed in our church? And I use that word risk because I think that the beginning of the year is a time to reevaluate what have we gotten super comfortable with and where do we need to be encouraged to step it up a notch or to do something different or to change paths. Or so it's a good discerning time, right? Because you also have to marry all of that with the calendar year and what is the consciousness, secular consciousness around that time of year as well. So I think it's a really wonderful time of year. So theological themes for Epiphany Plus, revealing God, mysterion, sacramentum, where's the holy breaking through, recognition of Jesus as the Christ, adoration, right? We've got the Magi. If we haven't told the Magi story before we get to Epiphany, we definitely want to tell it there. Baptism of Jesus, and therefore focus on our own baptism, perhaps a reaffirmation of baptism. More light, being enlightened, a renewal, change, healing, transformation. These are all things that I just mentioned. And then this word beloved, right? That Jesus hears from the voice when Jesus comes up out of the water at his baptism. This is my beloved, in whom I am well pleased. And what we're going to see is that the ascension then also that comes in, that word beloved. 6 Sundays this year, and I'm wrong. I put 2026. That is so wrong. And that's what I do sometimes is when I think of the 2026, 2027 liturgical year, you know, when you're pre-planning, it's 2027 next year, friends. It's 6 Sundays in 2027, including Epiphany Sunday and Transfiguration. Um, so that means it's a very short one. Sometimes we have 9 weeks, but a short one means what? That Lent is going to come fairly quickly. So, short Epiphany Plus season. We have several series in the Worship Design Studio that were specifically written for this time period. The ones that are for year B specifically are Bread, Bath, and Beyond, which I love. So we have first Sunday of the year, Communion Sunday, bread for many of our churches. Some of you have it every Sunday, but for the ones who do it once a month, it's usually the first Sunday. Bath, right? So there is the baptism of Jesus, and then beyond, and that is I have services for each one that's like beyond fear, beyond et cetera, et cetera. And that's going to be a much longer one, and you would just cut off the Sundays that you don't need in 2027 because it is a short year. But it's a wonderful series. I love that. God is Holding Your Life year is also year B in the Revised Common Lectionary. So you have choices for those of you who follow the Revised Common Lectionary. And I'm going to feature that one in just a moment. But while I'm here, let's just say that if you don't follow the Revised Common Lectionary, you can also use one from another year. So Six Stone Jars is based on year C. And I highly recommend it. It's one that really talks about abundance, right? And so it's a 6 week series. So you would want to make sure that you started it on Epiphany Sunday so that you have all six services of that one. Finish that on Transfiguration, and then you begin Lent the next Sunday. So some of these other ones I did specifically drawn in and spiritual affective disorder, or we'll leave the light on for you, or whatever you want to call that. Some churches didn't like using the acronym SAD, which seasonal affective disorder is a real thing. And this series kind of turns that on its head and says, sometimes we have spiritual affective disorder. We have times in our lives where we're not paying attention to our spirits and we can suffer because of that. And so I think the idea that we are uncomfortable calling a series sad may also be an indication that we're uncomfortable with mental health issues. And that's something we need to address because we all know that we have to talk about out loud about mental health in the context of our spiritual communities so that people know that it's not taboo, that it's not off limits, that it is a thing, and that we support everyone in good mental health. And so it's a really important one, I think, to look at as we help our congregations in the ways that we all need to be helped these days. The Change Makers is a wonderful series. If you haven't used it yet, it is really about asking ourselves, what are we called to do? And that could be a good first of the year series. Listen is an original Lent series, but it's a fairly old one. And those of you who are newer to Worship Design Studio, if you're going to do one of the newer Lent series, go back and look at Listen as a possible adaptation. So you just have to take the Lent references out of it, which is pretty easy to do. But it's about listening, hearing that still small voice and finding your own. And the beginning of the year is a really good time to begin to think about, have I found my voice? Have I lost my voice? What is my purpose in this life? What do I want to focus on this year, right? It goes along with the New Year's resolutions and all these kinds of things. And so a whole series, 6 weeks of, thinking about listening, or 4 weeks. So you could do Epiphany Sunday as the end of the Carol for the Coming Christ. Listen on the next Sunday. Do 4 Sundays do 4 Sundays that are in Lent. Pick the ones that you want. I mean, these are highly adaptable and they don't have to be in order, or, I mean, you can really adapt them in big ways, and then do Transfiguration before Lent starts. Reshaped is another one. It's about change. And so beginning of the year is also a good one for change. Let me just highlight the Year B selection, which was a collaboration with my friend Richard Bruxfort Culligan. And it was during pandemic. And so we created videos for every Sunday. And it's also really simplified the order of worship. And I even suggest that you have times of testimony instead of sermons. I mean, just think of it. You could have a whole season worth of not preparing sermons in the way that you usually do. And I did that during pandemic because people were exhausted, right? Especially pastors were exhausted. So it's an idea and it's based on the Psalms. Let's look at the trailer and then I'll tell you a little bit more about it.
is holding your life. God is holding your life. God is holding your life. We believe. God is holding your life. Yes, God is holding your life. Oh, God is holding your life. We believe.
So that's just a little taste of Richard's music. Super easy to sing and to catch on, and just beautiful looking at the Psalms. Now, since we did that, he just this year came out with a book called Dangerous Songs, The Psalms and a Gloriously Disrupted Life. And so this would make a wonderful book study to go along with that series. And so I wanted to highlight that since it was year B and he's got a new book out. And it could be a really wonderful message. God is holding our lives, right? And that's the comfort of the Psalms. I am thinking about taking one of my DIY series called Deep Well and making it a new, working on it in December for Epiphany Plus this year. It's a it was one that I did. I was in residence at a church in Sacramento, my dear friend Kathy McShane, and we did an alternative service for her church. It was a Friday night service, and it was deeply contemplative, and it was all things about water and the deep well that we need in order to sustain our spiritual lives. And so I'm thinking about doing that because it's a 5-week series, and that fits perfectly between the end of Carols for the Coming Christ and Lent. So it's about the renewing waters of our baptism, but it's much more, what will we come near to the well, to the deep well, to approach the well, to respond to the invitation. And so the themes are stories of Jesus in water, baptism, boats, wells, etc. There's plenty of them. And the 5 services are approach the well, enter the well, soak in the water, immerse, and then breathe, coming back out. And so, I do have a series called Roll Down Justice that featured images of water, the righteousness, flowing stream. But this one is a more contemplative take on it, and coming to the well on a regular basis to feed our spirits. So that's the one, that's what I am, it's a little preview of what I'm thinking about doing next after Carols for the Coming Christ is done, of course. And then moving on to this sense of deep well. But there are a lot of things that you can choose for Epiphany. So again, I've created cheat sheets for you. You can download those slide and these slides with all of this information so that you can begin your search if you're going to create your own series, looking at the Revised Common Lectionary texts. And again, the way I do them is I look at all the Hebrew texts for the whole series, so that's laid out for you. Then the Psalm texts, and if you'll notice right here from this cheat sheet, look at it. It's really about relationship with God, right? God redeems us. The Lord, the Creator, the voice over the waters. You've searched me and you know me. You know that beautiful. It's my favorite Psalm 139. God is a rock and salvation. The work of God's hands are faithful and just. And that's why my series, God is Holding Your Life, is really that sort of intimate look at how the divine is holding us, from the rising of the sun to its setting. So beautiful, beautiful. And I think a time like Epiphany is a great time to kind of go off of maybe the gospel focus and into the Psalms. It's a wonderful opportunity. Okay, epistle texts. This is all these good teachings to the early church in all of these letters. And then we get into the gospel texts. And that is really about the identity of Jesus, as we talked about. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Somebody asks, right? So here's God saying, "You are my son, the beloved, with whom I'm well pleased." And then you see transfiguration, the last Sunday of that, Mark 9. "This is my son, the beloved, listen to him," right? So it's this affirmation that Jesus is divine incarnate and as well as human and with us and teaching us. So that's the cheat sheet for Revised Common Lectionary. Here is the cheat sheet for the main scriptures for year one in the narrative lectionary. Again, we're in Matthew and we're completely in Matthew by this time, right? And so these are like greatest hits, right? The flight to Egypt, Jesus' baptism, tempted in the wilderness, the Beatitudes, the Lord's Prayer and the lilies of the field metaphor, parable, and then, of course, the Passion, Prediction, and Transfiguration. And so these are just greatest hits, like, of the story, getting us through. Matthew just lays it out for us. And the series that I have, the DIY series that I have in the Worship Design Studio, is called Holy Human, Holy Divine. And so this is an example of a series that is very theological, right? So we're digging into, what does it mean that we are an incarnational faith? What does it mean that Jesus was wholly human in its wholeness, right? And also wholly divine. And so if you think that your congregation could use kind of a deep dive in a theological concept like that, then that would be a good one for you this year. All right, friends. So again, in your handouts, you have the storyboard where you're going to put, whatever you decide you're going to do, your series title, whether you're using one of mine or creating one of your own, and then some ideas for visuals. Just, when you're doing the visionary retreat, which is long range planning, you're not going to get in the weeds, but you're just going to, what is top of mind? What is nudging at you? What kind of comes out at you? Visuals, media, music, verbal, and drama and action. And I do this with all the worship arts because I want us to really get the whole sensory rich philosophy behind my teaching, is that this is the way we communicate the good word best, and that is through all of the art forms in sensory rich ways, because people don't all learn and communicate in the same way. And it is our task to bring that message alive in ways that will touch people in the different ways that they learn, right? If you want to know more about multiple intelligences, if you're new to me and the Worship Design Studio, go in our new Homestack home in that guide to, there's that at the top, there's guides, and one is worship series. And I talk about my philosophy of worship series, but also sensory rich worship. Okay.